Hey guys, John Vlaska from PhoneArena, and this is a review of the LG G4, the phone that LG wants us to see the great, feel the great. But is it really that great? When you're constantly being overshadowed by another company, the expectations to improve results and rise to the occasion become more difficult. Now that's the position we've seen LG in the last several years, as its flagship line has always seemed to come in second after Samsung's offering. This year too, it's going to take a lot to overtake the Galaxy S6, which has been critically acclaimed so far. Now with this latest flagship, LG promises to outclass and outduel its friendly neighbor. And from what we've seen so far at the LG G4 launch event, the outcome seems pretty promising. The handset, which flaunts a new finish and the beefy specs to make us drool in anticipation. But will it be really enough to claim the top spot in the Android space? Superficially, this looks a lot like the G3 before it, though it's a smidgen taller, wider, and heavier. Honestly though, it's barely noticeable, but the most compelling part is the new case option that's available with it. Now while you can still pick it up in its all plastic form, one that has a 3D pattern design, we're really seeing a new handset with this new vegetable tan leather material, one that adds a level of sophistication to the phone's look and feel. For once, it feels like real leather. Add to that, you have the Gutermann mesh stitching going down the middle. It helps to elevate a design that's otherwise unchanged. And why is that? Well, it's obvious that minuscule changes have been made to the design. Like its harder lined frame, you have the subtle curvature to the phone made by its slim mark design, and you have also LG's signature placement of the power button and volume controls in the back of the phone. Yeah, it does come with an IR blaster, but it's missing some of the additional amenities we find in other devices like the Galaxy S6. So you don't get a fingerprint sensor, you don't have wireless charging, there's no rapid charging, and of course, you don't have a heart rate sensor. Now that might be a bummer and all, but we can't forget that we have a replaceable battery and micro SD card slot with this. In all seriousness, if it weren't for the new genuine leather material option, the LG G4's design would otherwise be a boring one lost in a world filled with more premium offerings. There's just nothing too polarizing about it at that point. Thankfully though, they're able to mix things up. The same can be said about its display and paper, but this is a totally different one here. Matching its predecessor, we have a 5.5-inch Quad HD touchscreen, so you expect crisp looking details with it. What's different though is that they've gone with a slightly different display technology this time around, an IPS quantum display to be exact. Sure, it sounds fancy and whatnot, but the end result is a display that delivers polarizing colors that pop, and it pops like no other. Technically speaking, it's not as great as the G3 when we benchmark its display. For one, it has a colder color temperature of 8,000 Kelvin, which is higher than the G3's tally, so whites tend to exhibit a tinge of blue. Again, it's a colder looking panel. At the same time, it's quite obvious that it has more saturated color reproduction, which is evident by looking at its color gamut chart. Now, while these qualities might be deemed as poor, LG purposefully delivers overblown and saturated colors, which has that drawing factor, and helps too that they improve its brightness output to 454 nits in our testing. So what this all tells us? While it's not as accurate this time around, the decision to offer a more saturated display is a purposeful one. So greens are green, you have blues that are dark blue, and reds are blood red. Trust us, the display is still able to stir up some tension due to its rich and vibrant colors, but it's clearly overblown to simply draw people into its glow. The LG UX 4.0 experience running atop of Android 5.1 Lollipop doesn't really change a whole lot from before, but it finds a right balance between form and function. Visually, there are some minor changes to the look and feel of the UI, so it's distinctively LG's interpretation with its neat, flat, and simple styling. Now there's a new level of personalization brought on by the availability of downloadable themes. Now although it's not as diverse as the theme option that we saw with Sense 7.0, it's still a nice touch that gives it a unique look, although the style of the core apps and services don't change at all. Functionally, it bears many of the same core features of LG's experiences. So you have things like knock on to turn on the screen by just performing a double tap. You have all the Q-Slide applications that get placed over whatever we're doing. And you also even have dual window for true multitasking with apps running side by side to one another. Now some of the new features include this peeking gesture to quickly see the time when it's locked. You have a quick help guide. And then you have also smart notices that dish up very useful tidbits. Even better, it brings along Lollipop's multi-user support feature. But for some odd reason, it's only limited to a second friend account. Overall, the interface is below Sense in terms of the visual department, while functionally it's a cut above most others, even rivaling the encompassing tally of TouchWiz. Work and play blend nicely with the LG UX 4.0 experience. It's powerful for productivity, surfing the web is flawless, and watching videos for long periods of time is excellent. All the basic stuff is handled effortlessly by the 64-bit based hexa-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 808 chip, which breaks down to 4 ARM Cortex-A53 and 2 ARM Cortex-A57 cores, and of course they're complemented by 3GB of RAM and the Adreno 418 GPU. So great package overall, of course. Now, like we said, the basic stuff it handles fine, but it kind of struggles in the graphics processing front. It's not hit with huge lag, but it doesn't really rival the fluid operations of other phones like the iPhone 6, the Galaxy S6, or even the HTC One M9. But we suppose that the Quad HD resolution isn't helping either here. The LG G4 comes with a brand new 16-megapixel camera sensor with a wide f1.8 aperture lens. You have also an improved optical stabilization, and you have also the same lickety-split laser-assisted autofocus in the back. But arguably, the most exciting new camera-related feature of the phone might be its new color spectrum sensor. Now, it's situated right below the single LED flash, which measures the ambient light to precisely recreate the color tones we see in real life. So there's no saturation or something else applied, giving it a very realistic quality when we look at things through the display. Beyond the exciting new gear, we're stoked that there's now a new manual mode with the camera app, rivaling the tight control we get out of devices like the Huawei P8 and even the handful of top caliber Lumia phones. Not only do we have options to modify the usual characters like white balance, focus, exposure, compensation, and ISO, but it's actually one of the few that allow us to adjust the shutter speed. And in this case, you get up to 30 seconds even with it. So how good is the camera? Well, the results are outstanding, to the point of even proclaiming it to be one of the best in its class. It handles a wide array of shooting conditions well, such as outdoor scenery, macro, and HDR shots, where its compositions provide crisp, ample details, you have good handling of dynamic range, and colors are naturally toned. I'm particularly impressed with its HDR quality, even though it's quite noticeable that post-processing effects are done to give it that artificial look and boosted color saturation. In addition though, you'll be astounded by the panoramic shots it's able to stitch together. It rivals and even eclipses the quality produced by the iPhone 6 and even the Galaxy S6, though it does take longer for it to process the entire thing. But how about low light? In the case of the LG G4, you can sleep peacefully because it's a strong performer, even when using the automatic mode, since we're pretty content with the compositions, which delivers details that are slightly smudgy in tone, but it's still enough to make us believe that it's a photo we're looking at and not some sort of brush painting. Nevertheless, better results are still obtainable by using the manual mode, where adjusting the ISO and the shutter speed accordingly produces images with incredible detail and clarity. You can even use the long exposure to do some novel light painting shots, which is pretty neat. As for video recording, we're given Ultra HD, Full HD, HD, and even slow motion modes. So there's enough variety for most people to accept. Now, its charming qualities include its acceptable level of detail, you have natural looking colors, steady capture brought on by its new optical image stabilization, and moderate exposure adjustment. However, its audio recording sounds a bit thin and light to our liking. Now, if you love taking all sorts of photos and videos, then you'll be impressed by how versatile the LG G4 is in various shooting modes. Trust us, the camera is a memory maker. Call quality of the G4 for the most part is unchanged from what we experienced last year with the G3, so you can expect great results. Both the earpiece and speakerphone produce strong volumes to make them usable in noisy environments. However, there's a slight hint of distortion to voices through the earpiece that make them sound a little bit artificial, but it isn't too terrible. On the other line, things seem to flow better since voices have great audible command and robustness. With its 3000 mAh battery, we find its performance under real-world usage to be on par to the rest of the recent flagships we've been testing. It's good to carry us through a solid one day of normal usage, but don't expect the long-lasting results of the Motorola Droid Turbo here. In our own custom battery benchmark test, it achieves a mark of 6 hours and 6 minutes, which is close to the mark of its predecessor, but we expected better. While it's on par to its direct rivals when it comes to battery life, it takes 127 minutes to charge it back to 100%. That's long, especially when compared to the rapid charging system of the Galaxy S6, Plus, there's no wireless charging system from the onset unless you pick up an optional case. In terms of pricing, you can expect the LG G4 to flaunt the usual 2-year contract price of $200 with most domestic carriers. But be warned though, because that's going to be for the non-leather variants of the phone. If you're thinking about that leather finish, just don't be too shocked if you have to fork over additional money, up to $100 possibly, just to pick up something refreshingly different. LG wants us to feel the great, and to that degree, they've succeeded in bringing the phone a new finish that's sophisticated. But more importantly, they want us to see the great, which we certainly can agree to. While it's not a dramatic update, the LG G4 meant to do what a successive phone is supposed to do each and every year, and that's simply to improve upon the opportunities missed with last year's product. In that regard, we could agree that the G4 trumps the G3 in several key areas to make it a worthy successor, but more importantly, a strong rival to the other handful of flagships out there.